Hello everyone, and hello from Sydney, Australia. My name's Lynda and I proudly work for Vaultbank, which is a licensed neobank based in North Sydney with a vision to change retail banking here in Australia. And I'm happy to be interviewing Steve Weston, who's the founder and CEO of Vaultbank, as part of the 2021 World FinTech Festival, showcasing Sydney as Australia's FinTech capital. And I know we've both sort of spent a lot of time outside of Sydney. So Steve, welcome. And before we get into Vault's journey, we'd really love to talk about you and your background.
Well, thanks, Lynda. And this seems a little funny because we work so closely together today, and I know it's going to an international audience. So hello to everyone watching at the moment. It's a very exciting time, I think, in banking in Australia, and to be one of two fully licensed, independently owned banks who are really going to bring the sort of competition to the Australian banking market initially that the community is calling out for is very exciting.
And so where did it all start in terms of launching a bank? I mean, how did that happen? Where did that thinking start?
You know, you wake up one day and say, what idea have I got? And away you go. Look, the truth isn't for all founders, and I'm sure there are a number who will be watching this video. We all have our own stories, don't we? And mine started growing up in a small town in Northern Australia called Bowen. And I wasn't much of a student. In fact, I was a pain at school. But I had this moment of serendipity, which many of us have as well. And mine was at the ripe old age of 13. All the students in my school had to do a week's worth of work experience. And the school gave you this big laundry list of all these employers that you could have a first and a second choice. And my second choice was a bank. And it wasn't because I had ambitions of one day becoming a banker, but Bowen was a tropical area and hot, and I knew the bank was air conditioned. So I threw number 2 in. I got the number 2 choice, and that week went well. The bank asked me to come back and do an exam to take on a job if I did okay at the exam and a role become vacant. And at the age of 15, one day the phone rang at school, and the Commonwealth Bank. Are you getting a repeat there, Lynda?
There was a little noise, actually. I think it's gone.
I'll just go back to that point. So okay, we're stopping. And then one day, at the age of 15, I received a message at school, and it was from the Commonwealth Bank, and they offered me a job, and I left school that day and left home not too long after and embarked on a banking career. And so started out in the bank branch and just progressed through different ranks and end up holding senior management roles. And the one thing I guess that was always a common thread for me was being able to help people. And whether that be someone that was going through difficulties, had a complaint, and when you got into more senior roles, you went from being able to help an individual person or an individual business to be able to innovate and help thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. After going through some of the Australian banking and non-banking scene, I ended up in 2012 in the UK at Barclays, one of the oldest and largest banks in the world, and run their lending business for them, and did a lot through difficult circumstances around taking a business that you would respectfully call broken and digitising it and taking it into global best in class. I also had a lot of time with regulators talking about some of the sins of the past in the UK banking. Spent there 4 years, loved every moment of it. Come back to Australia to have one of our daughters start high school and the oldest one to finish her last couple of years. And when I went and caught up with my old workmates and thought, do I go back into banking in Australia? I was surprised and disappointed that we hadn't got that the rest of the world was changing. In Australia, it was as we describe it, Lynda, she'll be right, mate, we're different. And I would have, with my conviction that things needed to be done differently, wouldn't have lasted too long at one of the big banks before they told me to go away. I was a pain. So that led me to saying, well, if you really think, mate, that there is something to be done here, you're going to need to go and do it yourself. There hadn't been a startup getting a banking license in Australia in something like 40 years. So that was a very big challenge to take on. So there was a lot of thinking. And then one night, the Australian government said that it wanted to bring more competition to the Australian banking market. I was watching the live TV broadcast. I didn't sleep that night, taking all those ideas I had in my mind and bits of paper. I filled out, I don't know how many pages worth of an exercise pad, and about 6 a.m. the next day, I started phoning people that I thought would be great additions to the team if we were going to disrupt banking in Australia. And within a fortnight, there were a dozen of us working on a feasibility study to determine whether it was viable to start a bank. That was May 2017, and of course, we gave it the go button and got a license in 2019, and about to go out and show the world what it is that we've been working on for those last few years.
Yeah, so like that's a journey, isn't it? Right? Like it's kind of in your blood. You started kind of early days. You obviously saw the UK, because I was in the UK when the banking crisis happened, and I mean it was a different experience. I mean, coming back to Australia and hearing Australians talk about the GFC, I think there are many people that call it GFC. I mean, sure, there was challenging times, but it wasn't the same thing or on the same scale. And then to come back into actually a slightly different marketplace and think about how you could do things differently is, I guess, as you say, you know, it's a journey, and it's kind of an epiphany, really. And then actually to be, as you say, the first to try and get a license when that's not been done before for decades. And maybe if you talk about, you know, obviously the regulator had changed the rules around getting a license. If you can talk to that journey, I mean, like, as you said, it took 2 years, right? But like, I don't think that was probably a seamless process. I think the regulators have been on a journey as well. And like, what would you do differently? I mean, like, it's now sort of 4 years on. Is there anything that you would do differently along that path?
Oh, a lot. But there are some things that I wouldn't do differently if I had my time over again. And one was actually being really disciplined about that feasibility study. So now Australia has 100 odd banks. So you reckon one more is going to really shake things up? And if we were going to go to the time and the effort to build a new sort of bank, it needed to do something different. And our vision is to change the way that banking is done and to change it for the better for all stakeholders, particularly customers. And that really meant that we did a deep dive on what would customers want and need from banks in the future, and ask ourselves, can we actually go and build that? And the answer is yes. And you know, we're well progressed along that journey now. The second thing we looked at was the sort of business models that banking would evolve into in time. And you'd seen platforms become ubiquitous across the world, but not so much in retail banking. And it's clear now we talk about banking as a service. We didn't even know the term banking as a service back in the initial business plan, but we always said the majority of customers that Volt would onboard would come via partnerships. We'd have a direct business, like most banks are, but the majority of our customers would come via partners. And we now talk about integrated finance and embedded finance, and you hear the Googles and the Apples and the Walmarts in the US and a whole host of companies now. And the demand in Australia is overwhelming, I must say. So we went with a different model, and that model not only would align with the way that banking was changing and demands from corporates in particular to offer banking products and payment solutions to their customers. It's also a less contested market. And then we mapped out initially for the Australian business, here's the Australian banking landscape. And we said, let's not go and take the big four bank on who, 80% market share and try to fight with them on every street corner. Where are the areas that are less contested in a digital bank with a banking as a service model could outcompete? And they're the areas that we have targeted. So there was a lot of science there, so wouldn't change that. Getting the license was no hard task. And so many times we've had fintechs come and meet us, and you've been in many of these meetings where people say, I'm going to become a bank. And you kind of get into cold sweats and you ask the question, do you have banking experience? Do you have a board? Do you have, tens of millions of dollars worth of capital? And it's almost like you're saying, oh, it's just too hard, don't try. And, as a founder, an entrepreneur, you want people to try, but it is just so hard. And that's why you've seen out of so many applying, there's only been a handful of licenses issued. Getting a license was hard, but building a bank with a different model where these skills just don't exist, that is much harder. So you're going and recruiting people who you think have the skill capability to build what you need to, and that will align with the culture. Finding talent in any market is difficult, but it's not as difficult once you have people. We call it the Volt train, on the Volt train. The harder thing is to create an environment where these very, very talented people can do their best every day. So there's been some massive learnings for us over the last few years. So in hindsight, if we're recruiting, we'd recruit differently, different skill set. Quite a number of our initial recruits were, the best in the game once a business is up and running and scaling up and the like. But that build, certainly for myself, was a different skill set, and it's been incredibly frustrating. We've learned a lot along the way. So there are some things that we would have done differently. Next time we do this, in fact, I'm getting too old for this. This will be my last hurrah, I think. I'm so passionate about doing it with Volt, but certainly there are things that we'd do differently.
So let's talk about the platform strategy and banking as a service platform and the opportunity in Australia, because I think a lot of people get a little confused between, okay, a banking as a service platform, and Volt is actually also a licensed ADI. So maybe talk about how that's a key tenet to Volt's vision.
Yeah, so we are blended, and it is confusing. So we do have a direct business where customers can open Volt bank accounts and cards and all those, takes out mortgages and all those good sorts of things. But as I said before, the vast majority of our customers will come via partners, because that part of the banking market is less contested. We only last week launched the first live banking as a service case in Australia. And really, there's only one other bank that's talking about it. It's one of the majors. And it's finding how challenging it is both to build a bank and, to get out of the market when you have your own incumbent channels that you're kind of competing about in some way. We probably now have got well over 100 businesses in Australia that have come to us wanting to explore banking as a service capability. And there are all different sorts of use cases. But if I was to summarize them, it is companies that are wanting to deepen engagement with their customers. They want to understand what customers are doing so they can tailor their offering to their customers. Most customer relationships have some form of payment between the customer and the business. And with banking as a service, you can remove payment friction, you can reduce payment costs, and all of those sorts of things. And of course, there's always a commercial motivation for the business to generate additional revenue. Whenever a bank account is involved, you either need to, as a company, become a bank yourself, which the vast majority of companies will never and never want to, and that's sensible. So you need to find a banking partner to work with. And as I said before, this is a new part of the banking world. And in Australia, there's only ourselves and Westpac, who are coming along with Afterpay, the buy now, pay later, as their first use case. So there's a real opportunity for us, and the demand has been so great. We've also partnered with a company called Railsbank, or Railspay as they're called in Australia, who are the global leader in the banking as a service intermediary layer. And what they do, if you think about, here's a company and it wants to offer bank accounts to its all its customers, it needs to be able to plug into a bank somehow. Most banks don't have that capability. So Railsbank very intelligently a few years ago went and built this intermediary layer. And they said, banks, look, we'll take the heavy lifting from you, we'll plug into you, and then we'll go and plug into the companies and we'll sit in the middle. And they've done this all around the world. In Singapore, where I know a lot of the viewers will be, their partner is DBS. In Australia, we are the sole banking provider. And what that does, a few things for us. We are a small business and we have limited resources to be able to onboard all these companies that want to work with Volt. via our banking as a service platform. Railspay will be able to onboard many more companies than we would be able to do under our own steam. The other benefit that Rails bring to us is they have a number of companies around the world that are their clients who want to move to Australia and leverage banking as a service capability. To be able to do that without new integration, still working with Rails, makes that process a lot easier for them. And then there are a number of Australian companies who want to access banking as a service in Australia and then want to go global as well. Now, if the countries they want to move to are the countries that Railsbank work in, it makes complete sense for the company, the Australian company, to work with Rails as well. So that's been a real feather in our cap. And as I said, only last week, we have a number in testing, but the first one went live, and that was the first use case in Australia, which is very exciting for the team.
Yeah, no, it is exciting. Exciting what Railsbank, or I guess they're known as Railspay here in Australia, like have built. But the opportunity, I think, for Volt and Railspay to work together is a number of things. What about actually some other platform customers that we're starting to work with? Because you're right, the thirst is actually so large. There's so many non-bank corporates that I think want to provision banking facilities to their end customers, and being able to do that in an open API enabled environment, like, this is all new.
Maybe I'll just touch on three really quickly. The first is Parpera, who went live last week. So we've got a number in testing that went live via our relationship with Railsbank, and they are a new fintech who provides services to micro SME businesses. Very cool, Daniel and the team, and they're orphaned and running. Another banking as a service partnership we have is with a group called AFG. They are listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. They're one of the big mortgage broking businesses in Australia. And last week, they went live with an AFG banking app. So AFG's customers will be able to see all of their bank accounts and credit cards and mortgages and so on through the AFG app. We've just onboarded the first 150 of the 3,000 plus mortgage brokers who are now distributing AFG home loans, white label mortgages that are processed and funded via Volt. And in time, AFG will distribute AFG branded deposit accounts. And when we move into SME lending and consumer lending, they'll have white label products there. But the app is really important to AFG. There are so many things they'll be able to do to help their customers live better lives, to make it easier to process mortgage applications and the like, all through the power of the app that we have built for them. And we've built for them in conjunction with Frollo, who are another fintech business we may talk about later, but the dominant player in open banking in Australia. And we grew up together. In fact, where I'm sitting now, Frollo co-located with us and a number of other fintechs up until late last year. That's an exciting story. One other use case, banking as a service use case partnership, is with BTC Markets. We're the largest of the digital currency exchanges in Australia. They have more than 3,000 traders. And in what we believe is a world first, we can't see it operating anywhere else, we provide both BTC as a corporate cash management account and cash management payment solutions. And then they will go and encourage their 300,000 plus consumers to also open Volt accounts. And it makes the money transfer, if I wanted to buy or sell digital currency, much quicker. In fact, the payments are instant. We've built back channeling of information to let BTC know. Lynda Coker has just transferred $2,000 into her account to pay to buy Bitcoin and the like. And then there are a number of other partnerships that are in various stages of testing and negotiation, either directly with Volt or through Railspay. But use cases are many and varied.
Yeah, and many other kind of types of partnerships to explore as well. It's just a shame you can't do it. You can't do it all at once. But let's get back to sort of you mentioned Frollo, and look, there's obviously a lot of other relevant fintechs out there for Volt to partner with. And I guess you and I have seen over the last 4 to 5 years just that fintech community consolidate and aggregate. How do you see Volt partnering with some of these companies?
Yeah, so we see ourselves playing a really helpful role. And I don't know, Lynda, how many fintechs we have had from Australia and overseas come and meet with us over the last few years, but certainly it's in the hundreds. And of course, you can't work with all of those, but a number we have, Frankie Financial, you know, again, it's a Frollo story. It starts off, and I think we weren't their first customer like we were with Frollo, we were close. And now everyone want to deal with them, and they've done well. And in future, looking back, and it'll be great that Volt's helped customers and brought banking as a service to Australia. But also the ancillary benefit is giving oxygen to really talented groups of people that were frustrated and finding it difficult to crack it with the big guys. And once the big guys seen that they were dealing with little guys, suddenly they become more interested in the way they go. But we also, you know, like to give back in terms of time and advice and suggestions of things that we did, the mistakes that we've made that people can avoid. And there is really a thriving, very, very friendly fintech community in Australia and in Sydney and New South Wales. You know, if we can help in any way those businesses to succeed, you know, that is great. And of course, you know, our team, we're full of entrepreneurs, and everyone's fintech at heart and always wanting to help. And even if we can't help directly ourselves and do business, you know, there's someone you talk to in 6 months or 12 months time where you go, ting, can I make an introduction for you? And, you know, those networks, I think, are helpful for us, and they're helpful for the fintech community as well.
Well, the world is small, and I guess also sort of having a platform strategy enables, you know, fintechs might have built certain features or tools that Volt may not have thought to, and, you know, you can plug it into the platform and cross-pollinate it across the platform. And I guess alongside that, you know, particularly in Australia with the rollout of open banking or the consumer data right, CDR as it's known here, that's going to even enable further opportunities in the same vein. And I saw today that Volt Bank was named as an accredited data recipient. So do you want to talk a little bit about our open banking strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And open banking is in its infancy in Australia, but it is now starting to ramp up. And there are two sorts of accreditation you can have. One, as a bank, it's what you call being a data holder, and that is where you need to make available your customers' data to third parties, provided the customer consent. And that really had to be live for all Australian banks. It's about 100 Australian banks. On the 1st of July this year, only 16 made it. I think we were number 9, which was quite amazing when we have this tiny data team and, you know, working on 100 different projects, but we got there. The other component of open banking is being a data recipient, and that's where you receive the data and you do something and show customers where you can give them a better deal, where you can save them time, make them more convenient. And so there are two sorts of accreditation. I was delivering a presentation at our AGM a day or two ago, 2 days ago it was, and the ACCC sent our accreditation through mid-speech. So lucky there was a Q&A afterwards, and one of the team grabbed me and said, we've just become the 6th bank in Australia, I think we're the 6th bank in Australia, or 9th bank in Australia, to become an accredited data recipient as well. And what that enables us to do, we don't have a lot of customers today, we will in time. So we're more likely to be able to help customers of other banks. So if they give us their consent to share our data, the sorts of things that we will do is they can see all of their bank accounts, credit cards, pension funds, frequent flyer points and the like through the Volt app. And then we'll show them where they can get better deals on their financial services products and in time on their gas and electricity and mobile phone plans and the like. But really importantly, help customers to budget, show them where they can spend more responsibly, and frankly, help them live better financial lives. If you are going to deliver against that vision, you need to access customers' data with their consent. You need to use it ethically, and you need to use it intelligently. So open banking is very good timing for someone like Volt Bank, and also a number of other fintechs who are starting in Australia.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time, I think, for the consumer in terms of actually having better access and control over their data, being able to switch provider more easily. And also, obviously, it's not just about banking, right? It's in due course, it's going to be super wealth, insurance, but also with a platform strategy. Like, I'm excited to see the platformication, if you like, of financial services, which is also going to be plugging in those things.
Absolutely.
In terms of via a platform. And I think it's going to enable more choice and sort of more modularity of services. And I know also with Volt, right, we're not necessarily with the platform thinking solely of product. It could be other services along that chain that can actually be offered as a service to others. I guess in terms of coming back to Sydney and the fintech community here, obviously you're from Sydney, so that
I've probably now spent more than half my life in Sydney, but I've lived overseas and grew up in northern Australia, and I still cheer for the Queenslanders. So for those of
we're both from Queensland, to be fair.
We are. So Queensland is a state where it's got all the tourism and a lot of the tourism and the Great Barrier Reef and the like, and it's a mad rugby league country. It's a those guys that beat each other up. And New South Wales, which is where Sydney is located, we have this big rivalry, don't we, Lynda? And you can never change where you come from. So I'm certainly a Queenslander, but love living in Sydney. My daughter's born.
Yeah. Yes, no, me too. And I mean, I have to admit, I went to London like you, and then I didn't really live in Sydney until I came back. But love it here, and love just what we were talking about before. Like, there is actually so much activity. Whilst it's grown during that time, I've also been amazed at the number of entrepreneurs and developers, and the investor community is also actually, I think, consolidated too. So it's an exciting time, but also I think, Australia is also small. So sort of connecting the dots across the country, as well as sort of partnering with organizations and companies like Railsbank. So, there's the opportunity to partner with parties that are outside of the country, and actually really in a way sort of enable some cross-border activity, because what we should be moving to is sort of banking beyond borders, right? So hopefully it can start here in Australia. And I'm just conscious of time, so in terms of a message to the world, given it's the World FinTech Festival, like what would you say in terms of not just Sydney, but also the opportunity and what you want to achieve with Bolt?
Yeah, I guess firstly, just talking about the opportunity for anyone watching who may be considering an entry to Australia. It's the community is very driven by change, and banking. 4 banks, 80% market share, are really looking for better services. The governments, both the Australian government and the state governments, New South Wales here for Sydney, very, very supportive of fintech, and thriving fintech community. But there is a real opportunity in Australia to disrupt. Highly regulated for those when they're working in payments and banking and those sorts of things. So firstly, I would be amazingly encouraging, and look, the restaurants and beaches and all the weather and that, not too bad either. And if anyone wanted to catch up and have a chat, as I said, we are always keen to talk and bounce ideas around. And then from Volt, we have now gone through this process of getting a license. I had hair in those days. I didn't actually. And then going out and ideating, building our full deposit product range, commencement of lending. We acquired an amazing mortgage technology business, and we're now starting to scale. So it's really exciting. And for our team, who have spent quite a lot of time in the darkness, almost building something they know is very special and disruptive, but they can't show the world, we're now beginning to reveal what it is that we've been working on. So I can't wait for 2022.
No, it's exciting times. Okay, well, I wanted to shout out a big thank you to Steve for doing this, and also a big thank you to Stone and Chalk and Austrade for allowing us to present as part of the festival. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynda. All the best, everyone.